The docking bay of Vera Station never got quiet. It was always loud. Always busy. Ships came in and ships went out at every hour of the day. Cargo loaders moved heavy crates across the floor. Traders argued with each other near the supply counters. Aliens of every shape and size walked through the wide corridors, going somewhere, doing something, always in a hurry. Nobody noticed the small dragon hatchling sitting by the window. He had been there for 3 days now. Maybe 4. He had stopped counting. He sat in the same corner, in the same spot, with his back against the cold glass and his thin legs folded under him. He did not make noise. He did not get in anyone's way. He just sat there, small and still, like a piece of the station that nobody had bothered to move. His name was Soren. He was young. Too young to be alone. Dragon hatchlings his age were supposed to be in clan homes, eating well, training, surrounded by family and teachers and the warm noise of other young dragons growing up around them. That was how it was supposed to be. Soren knew this because he remembered, very faintly, what the beginning of that life had felt like. Before everything changed. Before his father did not come back from the battle. Before his mother got sick and then got sicker and then was gone too. Before the clan elders looked at him, small, thin, quiet, and decided he was not worth the trouble of raising. They had not said it cruelly. That was almost worse. They had said it the way people say practical things. He is small. He is weak. He will not be a strong warrior. We have limited resources. We cannot take every orphan. And then they had turned away. That had been 7 weeks ago. Since then, Soren had learned how to survive on a space station alone. It was not a good life. But it was a life. He slept in corners that were warm and out of the way. He ate whatever he could find, scraps near food stalls, things left behind, the occasional small kindness from a vendor who looked at him a little too long and quietly left something within reach without making it into a conversation. He stayed clean because there were public washrooms near the docking bay and he used them early in the morning when they were empty. He stayed invisible because invisible was safe. But every day, no matter what else happened, he came back to the window. The big window that looked out over the main docking lanes. He sat there and he watched the ships. There was something about ships that Soren could not explain and had never tried to. He just knew that when he sat and watched them, the way they came in slow and steady, the way their engines burned in short clean bursts, the way they moved through the docking lanes with a kind of calm purpose, something inside him got very quiet. Not sad quiet. Just still. Like the part of him that was always a little bit afraid went to sleep for a while. His father had been a pilot. Soren did not know very much about his father. He had been so young when his father left for the last time. Most of what he knew came from small pieces, things his mother had said before she got too sick to talk much. Things he had overheard adults saying when they did not know he was listening. A few blurry memories of a large, warm presence and a deep voice and the smell of engine fuel on a flight suit. He knew his father's name. Dravik. He said it to himself sometimes quietly just to keep it from fading. He knew his father had flown. That he had been good at it. That he had been part of a fleet. A real one with ships from different species flying together. His mother had said once, on a good day when she was still strong enough to sit up and talk, that his father flew like he had been born in the sky. That when he was in a ship he was completely himself in a way he was not anywhere else. Soren understood that. He did not know how exactly. But he understood it. He carried one thing that had belonged to his father. A data chip. Small, cracked along one edge, the casing broken so that the locking mechanism no longer worked properly. It had been in his mother's things and he had taken it when she died because it was the only object he had that had touched his father's hands. When he pressed the right spot on the broken casing, it projected a small image, faint, flickering, barely visible in anything brighter than a dim room. A dragon in a flight suit standing in front of a ship, looking at the camera with calm, steady eyes. The same amber color as Soren's. He kept the chip in the one small pocket of the worn jacket he had found weeks ago, left behind on a bench near the transit terminal. The jacket was too big for him. He did not care. It had a pocket and the pocket kept the chip safe. He was sitting at the window with one hand pressed flat against the glass when the ISV Perseverance came in. It was not the biggest ship in the docking lane. It was a mid-size vessel, a patrol and supply runner, built for long routes and hard use. Its hull was clean but worn in the way that working ships get worn. Not damaged. Just used. Honest. But the way it moved made Soren sit up. It came into the docking lane at exactly the right speed. Not too fast. Not uncertain. The approach angle was clean and straight. The thrusters fired in short, controlled bursts, just enough, never too much. Whoever was flying that ship knew it completely. There was no wasted movement. No correction. Just one smooth, steady line all the way in. Soren watched it the way he watched all the ships he loved. With his full attention. With his hand against the glass. With that stillness inside him that nothing else could produce. And without meaning to, without even realizing he was doing it, he whispered, "My father once flew like that." The words were so quiet they were barely sound. Just breath, really. Meant for no one. Just something that came out of him because it was true and because there was no one to say it to and it needed to be said anyway. He did not hear the footsteps behind him stop. He did not notice anything at all until a woman crouched down beside him. She was human. Average height, short brown hair, a face that had seen a lot of years and made a lot of decisions. She was wearing a captain's duty jacket, the same kind of worn, honest look as her ship. She had clearly just come off a long run. There were the small signs of it, the tight set of tired shoulders, the careful way she moved. But her eyes were alert. Calm and alert, the way the eyes of people are when they are used to noticing things that matter. She had heard him. Soren went very still. The way a small creature goes still when it has been spotted and is not yet sure if it is in danger. She did not reach for him. She did not speak quickly. She just settled into a crouch beside him at the window, looked out at the docking lane where her ship had just come to rest and waited. A moment passed. Then she asked in a voice that was quiet and had nothing sharp in it, "Which ship did your father fly?" Soren looked at her. He studied her face for the trick. For the part where this cost him something. For the thing she wanted from him in exchange for the attention. Her face was just steady. Patient. Not performing kindness. Just actually being still. He looked back at the window. He did not answer her question. But he did not move away either. Outside, the ISV Perseverance finished docking. The landing clamps locked with a deep, solid sound that Soren felt more than heard. The running lights dimmed one by one. The engines went quiet. The woman sat down fully on the floor beside him, her back against the glass, looking out at the same view. She did not ask again. She did not pull out a communication device and make it clear she had somewhere more important to be. She did not look at him with the particular kind of pity that made him feel like something broken that people were deciding whether to deal with. She just sat there. Soren looked at her once more from the corner of his eye. Then he looked back at the ship. His hand was still against the glass. The station moved and hummed and roared around them, full of people going somewhere. And for the first time in 7 weeks, Soren did not feel completely invisible. Nora did not move for a long time. She just sat beside him on the cold floor of the docking bay, her back against the glass, watching the ships the same way he watched them. She did not make it into anything. She did not turn it into a situation. She just sat there like two people who happened to be looking at the same thing. The station moved around them. Loud and busy and completely uninterested in either of them. After a while, Nora stood up slowly and said, in the same quiet voice she had used before, "I'm going to get some food. Do you want some?" Soren looked up at her. That careful look again. The one that checked for conditions. The one that had learned, over 7 hard weeks, that things offered for free usually were not. Nora did not wait for his answer. She walked to the nearest food stall, a small counter 20 steps away that sold warm wrapped meals and hot broth, and she bought 2 of everything. She came back and sat down beside him again and put one portion next to him on the floor, close enough to reach but not pushed at him. Then she started eating her own food. She did not look at him while he decided. Soren looked at the food for a long moment. The smell of it reached him and his stomach responded in a way that he could not control, a deep and immediate pull that was embarrassing in its honesty. He picked it up. He ate slowly, carefully, like someone rationing something that might not come again. Nora watched her ship through the window and finished her own meal and did not comment on how he ate or how fast or how much. When he was finished she asked him lightly like it was not important. "How long have you been on the station?" Soren was quiet for a moment. 7 weeks, he said. She nodded. She did not say anything dramatic about that. She did not make a face or lean forward or ask a string of fast questions. She just nodded, like he had told her something she was filing away carefully. "Alone?" she asked. "Yes," he said. Another nod. They sat in silence for a little while longer. The docking bay hummed. A large cargo ship on the far side of the bay fired its secondary engines for a departure check, and the sound rolled through the floor under them. Soren felt it in his feet and his hands and the base of his wings, that low engine rumble, and without thinking he closed his eyes for just a second. When he opened them, Nora was looking at him. Not with pity. With something quieter than that. Something more careful. "What is your name?" she asked. He almost did not answer. He had not said his name to anyone in weeks. Saying your name to someone felt like a small door opening, and he had kept all his doors shut for a long time because open doors let things in, and things coming in had not gone well for him. But something about the way she asked it, simply, without pressure, like she would accept silence just as easily, made him answer. Soren, he said. Soren, she repeated the same way, no added weight. I am Nora. She did not say Captain. You would find that out later. Right now she just said her name the same way he had said his. Like they were equal things. The silence that followed was different from the ones before it. A little warmer. A little less like two strangers and a little more like two people who had just agreed without words to keep talking. Where is your family? Nora asked. Still quiet. Still easy. Soren looked at the window. Gone, he said. Nora waited. Soren did not plan to say more. He had not talked about this to anyone, not really, not the full shape of it. He had kept it inside him where it was heavy but at least private. But something about sitting still for this long and having eaten something warm, and being next to someone who was not in a hurry and did not seem to want anything from him, something loosened. Just a little. My father died in a battle, he said. A long time ago. I was very small. I am sorry, Nora said. Simply. My mother got sick after that, he continued in the same flat, careful voice. She got worse for a long time and then she died too. He stopped. Nora said nothing, just stayed still, and that stillness made it easier to continue. My clan was supposed to take me, he said. That is how it works. When there is no family, the clan takes the young ones. They are supposed to. But they did not, Nora said. Not a question. They said I was too small, Soren said. Too weak. They said I would not grow into a strong warrior. They said they had limited resources and they could not take every orphan who was not worth the investment. He said those last words the way he had heard them. Flat and practical. The way the elders had said them, like they were just describing a fact about weather. Nora's jaw tightened. Just slightly. Just for a moment. Then it was still again. So I left, Soren said. I had nowhere to go, so I came here. There are always people here. It is warm. You can find food if you know where to look. He stopped talking. That was the shape of it. That was the whole story as far as he had ever said it out loud, and it sat between them now, neither small nor large, just true. Nora looked at the window for a moment. Then she asked gently, What was your father's name? This was the question that was different from the others. Soren felt it land differently. Felt the weight of it. Not in a bad way. In the way that important things have weight. He had said his father's name to himself in the dark many times. Quietly, like keeping a small flame from going out. But he had not said it to another person since his mother died. He said it now. Dravik, he said. Commander Dravik. Something changed in Nora's expression. It was small and fast and she controlled it quickly, but Soren saw it. He was very good at reading faces. 7 weeks alone had made him better at it. She knew the name. You know it, he said. She looked at him directly. She did not pretend. I have heard it, she said. I know there was a battle. I know his name is connected to it. I do not know the full story. Soren looked back at the window. Neither do I, he said quietly. Not really. My mother told me small things. He was a pilot. He was part of a mixed fleet, different species flying together. He was good at it. She said he flew like he belonged in the sky. He stopped. And then he did not come back, he said. And nobody ever told me exactly why or what happened. Just that there was a battle and he was gone. Nora was very still beside him. Soren reached into the pocket of his too big jacket. His fingers found the familiar shape of the data chip, the cracked edge, the broken casing, the small rough spot where the locking mechanism had failed long ago. He took it out. He held it in both hands for a moment, looking at it. It looked like nothing. Like a piece of broken old technology that should have been thrown away. Worthless to anyone who did not know what it was. He pressed the right spot on the broken casing. The image appeared. Small, faint, flickering in the bright light of the docking bay, barely visible but there. A dragon in a flight suit. Standing in front of a ship with one hand resting on the hull. Looking at the camera with calm, steady eyes. Amber eyes. Nora looked at the image without speaking. Soren looked at it too. He had looked at it so many times that he knew every detail of it. The way his father stood, the set of his shoulders, the exact way he looked at the camera, like he was completely comfortable in that place, in front of that ship, in that suit. Like it was where he was supposed to be. This is the only thing I have, Soren said. From him. Just this. The image flickered once and then held, small and pale, in the palm of his hand. Nora looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at Soren. At his thin frame and his pale scales and his amber eyes that were identical to the ones in the flickering image. At the too big jacket and the careful way he held the broken chip like it was the most valuable thing in any room he had ever been in. She did not say anything right away. She just sat with him and looked at the image of his father together, in the loud busy docking bay where nobody else noticed them at all, while the ships came and went outside the glass. The night before departure, Nora told Soren the truth. She sat beside him in the crew lounge of the Perseverance, where he had spent the last 2 days eating proper meals and sleeping on a temporary mat that Sela had set up in the corner without making a big event of it. She did not dress the words up. She did not make them softer than they were. She just told him clearly and honestly, the way she told her crew things when they needed to hear them straight. There was a station welfare office on level 4. It was a clean place, safe, run by people whose job was to take care of unaccompanied young ones until a proper arrangement could be made. A representative would come at the 7th hour in the morning. They would take Soren there. He would have a proper room, proper meals, people looking after him. The Perseverance had a supply run. 3 weeks out, 3 weeks back. She could not take him on a working mission without proper authorization, and she did not have that yet. She said all of this clearly. She said it looking at him directly because he deserved that. Soren listened to all of it without moving. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded, once, in that small careful way he had, the way that looked like dignity but was actually a hatchling holding himself together with both hands. "I understand," he said. Nora looked at him for a moment longer than necessary. Then she said good night and went to her quarters. She told herself it was the right decision. Proper procedure. The responsible thing. The welfare office was real and safe and staffed by people who knew how to handle situations like this. She believed all of that. She still did not sleep well. At the 5th hour of the morning, the station lights were still in their dim blue night cycle. The docking bay was quieter than usual. The Perseverance sat in its berth, fully loaded, ready to depart at the 7th hour. Nora came down to the cargo hold to sign off on the final load manifest. It was a routine thing. She did it before every departure. Walked the hold, checked the crates against the list, signed the clearance form. 10 minutes, maybe 15. Then back to the bridge to begin pre-departure checks. She was 3 rows into the hold when she saw it. Behind the second stack of supply crates on the left side, the large ones, the ones that made a kind of enclosed corner against the hull wall, there was a small shape. Curled up. Very still. Made as small as possible in the way that a creature makes itself small when it has learned that being small means being overlooked. Soren was asleep. He was curled on his side on the hard floor of the cargo hold with his knees pulled up and his wings folded tight against his back. His too big jacket was pulled around him as much as it could be. One hand was tucked under his chin. The other was pressed flat against his chest, over the pocket where the data chip was. His face in sleep looked exactly as young as he actually was. Nora stood very still. She looked at him for a long time. At the way he had made himself fit into the smallest possible space. At the hand pressed over the pocket with the chip. At the fact that he had not brought anything else. No bag, no extra items, because he did not have anything else. He had come onto this ship with nothing but a broken data chip and a too big jacket and had decided, quietly and alone in the middle of the night, that this was the place he was staying. He had not asked. He had not argued. He had not made a scene. He had just come here and made himself small and gone to sleep, the way someone does when they have made a decision and are done discussing it. Nora stood in the cargo hold for a long time. Then she turned around and walked back to the bridge. She called a short crew meeting. Just the core 4. Ren, Sela, Finn, and Petra gathered around the small briefing table with the particular alert stillness of people who had learned that early morning meetings usually meant something had changed. Nora told them what she had found. The silence that followed was the thinking kind. Ren sat back in his chair and crossed his large arms. He was the one who had been most uncertain from the start. He was the one who had made practical observations about regulations and unauthorized passengers. He was the one who had watched Soren through the lounge window on the first day with the expression of a man deciding whether or not he had a problem. He spoke first. He spoke slowly, working it out in words as he went. He did not stow away to cause trouble, Ren said. He did not steal anything. He did not break anything. He paused. He came here because this is the first place that felt safe to him. And instead of asking and risking being told no, he just quietly made sure he would not be left behind. He stopped. Nobody argued with that. Sela was already at her console. She had filed the medical report the night before. Detailed, accurate, documenting Soren's condition when he came aboard. Low weight, poor nutrition, untreated injury. A minor bone condition from weeks of inadequate food. She had filed it officially through the proper channel at the 22nd hour. She looked up at Nora. "It is already in the system," she said calmly. "I had a feeling it might be needed." Nora looked at her for a moment. Then she turned to her own console. She opened the crew registry and navigated to a section she had looked at once before, late the previous night when she could not sleep. A section that most captains never touched because most captains never needed it. Article 7, Section 3 of the Galactic Transit Humanitarian Code. Unaccompanied minor. Documented distress. Temporary crew observer status. Humanitarian provision. It required a captain's formal authorization and a confirmed medical report. Sela had already filed the medical report. Nora authorized the registry entry. She typed the name carefully. Soren, Crew Observer, Humanitarian Provision. SV Perseverance. Then she opened a formal communication to the station welfare office. She wrote it politely. She wrote it professionally. She stated that the minor in question had been formally registered under humanitarian provision by the ship's captain, that all required documentation had been filed through proper channels, and that the scheduled collection at the 7th hour was no longer necessary. She signed it with her full title and her captain's code. She sent it. Then she stood up and walked back down to the cargo hold. She crouched down beside the supply crates and spoke in a normal voice. Not loud. Not dramatic. "Soren. You can come out." Pause. Silence. Then a very slow and careful movement behind the crates. One amber eye appeared first, peering around the edge of the stack. Checking. "You are not in trouble," Nora said. The eye studied her face for a long moment. Looking for the catch. Looking for the part where this went the way most things went. Soren came out slowly. He straightened up in front of her, both hands wrapped around the data chip that he had already taken out of his pocket, holding it against his chest. His expression was guarded and waiting and very controlled for someone so young. Nora stayed crouched so she was at his level. "I found you a proper bunk," she said. "It is small but it has a blanket that is actually your size." Sela picked it out. She paused. "You are on the crew manifest now. Officially. I filed the paperwork an hour ago." Soren stared at her. "The welfare office?" he asked. "Notified," Nora said. "The matter is closed." He kept staring. That careful processing he did, where he took information in slowly and completely before he responded, making sure it was real before he let himself believe it. "I am staying?" he asked. "You are staying," she said. Something moved across his face. Fast and small and quickly controlled. But it was there. He did not cheer. He did not cry. He stood in front of her in his too big jacket with his data chip held against his chest, and he nodded with that small careful dignity that she was already learning to recognize as the way Soren expressed things that were too large for ordinary reactions. Then very quietly he asked, "Humans don't leave, do they?" It was not quite a question. It was something between a question and a thing he was testing out loud. Like a fact he wanted to check against someone who would know. Nora looked at him steadily. Directly. The same way she had looked at him the first time at the window, when he had checked her face for the trick and found none. "Not when it matters," she said. Soren held her gaze for one long moment. Then he looked down at the data chip in his hands. He turned it over once, slowly, the way he did when he was thinking. Then he put it carefully back in his pocket. He looked back up at her. "You said the bunk has a blanket," he said. "It does," Nora said. "Okay," he said simply. Nora stood up. She turned toward the cargo hold exit and walked. Behind her, she heard small, quiet footsteps following. The ISV Perseverance departed Vera Station at the 7th hour, right on schedule. And at the large forward window on the crew deck, a small dragon hatchling in a too big jacket stood and watched the station grow smaller behind them. He did not look sad. He did not look scared. He looked like someone who was finally going somewhere. The first few days on the Perseverance were quiet ones for Soren. Not uncomfortable. Just quiet. He was still learning the shape of the ship. Learning which corridors led where. Learning which sounds were normal and which ones meant something needed attention. Learning the rhythm of a working vessel. When the engines hummed a certain way, when the lighting shifted for night cycle, when the crew moved from task to task, and what their faces looked like when things were going well versus when something small had gone wrong. He watched everything. He always had. Watching carefully was how he had survived 7 weeks alone on a station. And old habits do not disappear just because the situation improves. But slowly, carefully he began to do more than watch. It started with Ren. Soren had noticed from the beginning that the engine room door was almost always open. Ren worked long hours and he worked with the door open because he liked the noise of the ship around him while he was inside it. Soren had started sitting near the doorway during the first day, not entering, just close enough to see what was happening inside. Ren had noticed him there and said nothing. On the second day, Ren had held out a calibration tool without looking up from what he was doing and said in his flat, practical voice, "If you are going to sit there, you might as well make yourself useful. Turn this 3 times to the right and tell me what the reading says." Soren had taken the tool and done exactly what he was told. The reading was correct. Ren had grunted in a way that meant he was satisfied and handed Soren the next tool. By the 4th day, Soren had a small dedicated section of the conduit panel that was his responsibility to maintain. Ren showed him once how to do each thing and did not show him twice because Soren did not need to be shown twice. He was precise and he was careful and he did not get distracted. Ren told Nora in the corridor outside the engine room, speaking quietly and not looking at her. "He is better at this than most people I have trained who were twice his age." Nora said nothing. She made a note in the crew log. Sela continued to look after his health in the calm, quiet way she did everything. His meals were larger than they had been at first and she did not make an announcement about this. She simply put more food in front of him. Every time she did, Soren said thank you in the same precise and formal way, like the words were something valuable that should be given carefully and not spent on nothing. Sela told Petra one afternoon that in all her years of medical work she had never had a patient say thank you so consistently and so seriously for every single thing. Petra smiled and said that probably said something about what his life had been like before. Sela did not smile back. She just went quiet in the way she went quiet when something sat heavily with her. Finn showed Soren the navigation charts on the 3rd day, mostly because Soren had been staring at the navigation console from across the bridge for 2 days with an expression of focused longing that was difficult to ignore. Finn was a quiet person himself and he and Soren understood each other in the way that quiet people sometimes do, without needing much explanation. Finn pointed at things and named them and Soren absorbed everything without asking to have anything repeated. Within 2 days Soren could read the basic route charts on his own. Finn told no one about this. He simply started leaving the charts open on the secondary console where Soren could reach them. On the 6th evening Soren sat beside Nora at the large forward window. This had become a quiet habit between them. In the evenings when the crew was winding down and the ship was in steady transit, Nora would sit at the forward window for a while before her final checks, and Soren would come and sit beside her, and they would look at the stars together without needing to fill the silence. That evening Soren looked at the window frame for a while and then asked, "Why do human ships have such large windows?" Nora thought about it for a moment. She considered the real answer, not just the quick one. "We like to see where we are going," she said. "And remember where we came from." Soren was quiet for a moment. "My father used to say something like that," he said. "My mother told me once." She said he told her that a pilot who cannot see the sky cannot understand it. "He was right," Nora said. Another silence. The comfortable kind. "He would have liked your ship," Soren said. Nora looked at the stars outside the window. "I think I would have liked your father," she said. Soren did not respond to that. But he stayed at the window longer than usual that evening, looking out at the dark between the stars, and his face was not sad exactly. It was something more complicated than sad. Something that had sadness in it but also something else. Something that looked almost like pride still finding its shape. The alert came on the 9th day. It was a standard scanner notification at first. Another vessel in the area, matching their speed, moving into parallel range. Not unusual near transit lanes. Nora glanced at it from the captain's chair and waited for the automatic identification ping. The ping came back and the bridge went a little quieter. Dragon Clan warship. Veteran class. One of the oldest and most powerful clan lines in Dragon space. It had moved into their lane deliberately and was holding position off their port side with the particular stillness of a ship that wanted to be noticed. A hail request came through. Nora accepted it. The face on the communication screen was a dragon of considerable age. Her scales were deep gray, almost silver, the color that came with many decades of life. Her eyes were cold and sharp and moved immediately before anything else, to the back of the bridge where Soren was sitting at the secondary console working through a navigation chart with Finn. Those eyes stayed on Soren for just a moment too long. Then they moved to Nora. "Captain," the dragon said. Her human standard language was perfect and precise and completely without warmth. "I am Elder Korra of the Veteran clan. The hatchling on your bridge bears the markings of the Dravic bloodline." "He does," Nora said. "He must be transferred to clan custody immediately," Elder Korra said. "He is dragonborn. He falls under clan jurisdiction." This is not a request. Nora kept her voice even and her face still. The hatchling in question was found unaccompanied and in documented distress on a neutral station, she said. Under Article 7, Section 3 of the Galactic Transit Humanitarian Code, he has been formally registered as crew observer under my temporary guardianship. He is on my manifest. He is under my protection. The filing is complete and on record. Elder Cora's expression did not change. But something shifted behind her eyes. A small tightening. The Dravik bloodline is disgraced, she said. Flat. Final. Like reading from a document. His father defied direct clan orders. He abandoned his assigned position during active combat without authorization. He acted against the decision of his commanding officers. The bloodline carries that shame and it always will. The bridge was very quiet. Nora looked at Elder Cora for a long moment. With respect, Elder, she said in a voice that was perfectly calm, a disgraced bloodline still produces living children. And living children are not responsible for their parents' decisions. He was abandoned by his clan on a neutral station at 7 weeks old. Whatever your position on his father, that child did nothing to deserve being left alone. Elder Cora was silent for a moment. This is not finished, she said. It is for today, Nora said. Safe travels, Elder. She closed the channel. The clan warship held its position for a moment longer. Then it pulled away from their lane and was gone. The bridge stayed quiet. Nora turned around slowly. Soren was standing in the middle of the bridge. He had stood up from the console at some point during the conversation. He was holding the data chip in both hands, turned over and over slowly the way he did when his mind was working hard. He had heard everything. His face was doing the thing it did when something hurt and he was refusing to show it, that careful controlled stillness, that practiced blankness that was not actually blankness at all if you knew how to look at it. Finn had stepped back quietly. Ren, who had appeared in the bridge doorway during the call, was still standing there. Sela was at her station. Nobody spoke. Soren looked at Nora. Was my father wrong? He asked. His voice was very steady. To fight with humans. To leave his position. Was he wrong to do it? Nora crossed the bridge. She crouched down to his level the way she always did, so she was looking at him directly and not down at him, and she held his gaze with the same calm steadiness she had held it with from the very first day at the window. He saw people who needed protecting, she said. He made a choice to protect them. He did not do it for reward. He did not do it because someone told him to. He did it because it was the right thing and he knew it was the right thing and he did not let anything stop him. She paused. That is never wrong, she said. Not ever. Not by any measure that actually matters. Soren looked at her for a long time. Then he looked down at the data chip in his hands. He turned it over once more. Then he stopped turning it and held it still. He closed his fingers around it. When he looked back up his eyes were bright but his face was steady and something in the set of his small shoulders was different than it had been before the call. Not louder. Not harder. Just a little more certain. Like something had been decided. Saratha's landing was not much to look at from orbit. It was a small settlement on a rocky plateau, far out on the edge of explored space. The kind of place that existed not because it was easy to live there but because some people simply needed to be somewhere that the rest of the universe had not yet reached. A cluster of prefab buildings in a rough circle. Solar arrays along the ridge lines catching whatever light the distant sun offered. A small landing field cut into the flat stone, just wide enough for a mid-size vessel. The Perseverance set down cleanly and the cargo unloading began. Soren helped. This was simply a fact now. He had appointed himself Ren's assistant somewhere around day 5 of the voyage and Ren had stopped pretending this was temporary somewhere around day 6. Soren carried equipment, passed tools, held panels in place, and moved with a focused quiet efficiency that made the work go faster without him ever needing to be told what to do twice. Ren had told him this once, gruffly, on the 7th day. Soren had filed it away like something precious. The colony administrator was a tired-looking woman named Dot who handled the cargo manifest with brisk efficiency and did not waste words on anything that did not need them. Nora liked her immediately. They went through the delivery checklist together at the landing field while the crew worked behind them. It was an ordinary arrival. Routine. Exactly the kind of steady, unremarkable work that kept outer colonies alive. It stayed ordinary for about 10 minutes. Dot looked up from her manifest screen and caught sight of Soren carrying her equipment case alongside Ren. She went completely still. Not a small stillness. A full stop, the way a person stops when they see something they were not prepared to see. Her eyes fixed on Soren with an expression that Nora could not immediately read, Not fear, not hostility, something more like sudden and total recognition. Nora watched her carefully. Dot turned her head toward the main colony building and raised her voice. "Harlan," she called. "Come out here right now." Her tone was not alarmed. It was the tone of someone who had just seen something that someone else needed to see immediately. A long pause. Then the sound of a door. The old man who came around the corner of the building moved carefully. He was very old. The kind of old that lived in every part of a person, in the white hair and the deeply lined face and the slow deliberate way he placed each step, like his body had strong opinions about cold stone and uneven ground. He wore a faded jacket. On the left shoulder was a small pin, an interspecies fleet insignia, old design, the kind that had not been made for many years. He came around the corner squinting against the light and looked toward Dot. Then his eyes found Soren. He stopped walking. He stood completely still in the middle of the landing field and stared at the small dragon hatchling who was carrying an equipment case beside a large human engineer and had no idea he was being looked at. The old man's face did something complicated. Something that moved through several things at once. Shock and recognition, and something that looked almost like it hurt, but in the way that finding something lost can hurt, the sudden ache of something you had given up on suddenly being real again. "Dot," he said quietly without looking away from Soren. "How?" "I don't know," she said. "I just saw him." Nora stepped forward. "Is something wrong?" The old man did not answer immediately. He walked forward slowly, crossing the landing field toward Soren, and Nora moved with him, watching carefully. Soren noticed the old man approaching and stopped walking. He set the equipment case down and looked up. His expression went to the careful neutral that it always went to when something new was happening and he had not decided yet what it meant. The old man crouched down in front of him. He studied Soren's face. His markings. The amber eyes. He looked at all of it slowly and with complete attention, the way someone looks at something they need to be absolutely certain about before they trust what they are seeing. Then very quietly, "You are Dravik's son." It was not a question. Soren's whole body went rigid. His eyes sharpened. "How do you know that?" he asked. His voice was careful and controlled, but there was something underneath it, something tight and almost frightened in the way that hope can be frightening when you have learned not to have it. The old man looked at him steadily. "Because I flew beside your father for 3 years," he said. "My name is Harlan. I was there the day he died." The colony's small common room had a low table and simple chairs and a window that looked out over the rocky plateau toward the ridge lines where the solar arrays stood. Someone brought hot drinks. Nobody touched them. Nora sat to the side. This was not her conversation. She was there because Soren had looked at her when Harlan suggested they go inside, a fast look that asked without words if she was coming, and she had come. Harlan sat across from Soren and he spoke slowly. He chose every word carefully. Not to soften them, he did not seem like a man who softened things for comfort, but to make sure they landed correctly. To make sure each piece was clear before he moved to the next one. He told Soren about the battle. There had been a mission. A large-scale operation involving ships from several species flying together under a joint fleet command. Dravik had been one of the senior pilots, experienced, respected, exactly the kind of pilot you wanted on a difficult mission. He had followed orders well and he had been good at his job and everyone who flew with him trusted him. Then the enemy had done something unexpected. A flanking strike. Fast and quiet, coming from a direction the fleet had not fully covered. It was aimed at a group of evacuation ships that were moving through a transit corridor nearby, 3 colony transports, large slow vessels that could not maneuver quickly and could not fight back and could not reach jump distance before the flanking force reached them. The main fleet was occupied. Fully committed. There was nothing to send. The flanking force would reach the evacuation ships in minutes. Harlan paused here. He looked at Soren steadily. "Your father was looking at the same scanner I was looking at," he said. "We both saw it at the same moment. I looked at it and I thought, there is nothing we can do. I looked at the numbers and the distances and I thought it was already over for those ships." He stopped. "Your father looked at the same numbers and he broke formation." He said it simply, without drama. He did not ask for permission. He did not wait for an order. He just went. He came on the comm for 1 second, and he said, "I have them, keep your position." And then he was gone. Soren had not moved. He was sitting with both hands flat on the table, very still, his amber eyes fixed on Harlan's face. "He intercepted the flanking force alone," Harlan said. "One fighter against a strike unit. He should not have been able to hold them. By the numbers, by any reasonable calculation, he should not have lasted long enough to matter." Harlan's voice was steady but something in it had changed. Something quieter had come into it. He lasted long enough, he said. He held them off and he kept them off and he bought every minute that those evacuation ships needed to reach jump distance. All 3 ships got out. Every single one. He paused again. 261 people, he said. That was the count. Families, workers, children from a border settlement being evacuated. 40-some young ones of different species who would not have made it without those extra minutes. The common room was very quiet. When the evacuation ships jumped, Harlan said, his fighter was already gone. Soren sat with that for a long moment. Then he asked in a voice that was very quiet and very even. The clan said he abandoned his position. That he disobeyed orders. That it was a disgrace. He did disobey orders, Harlan said without flinching from it. That part is true. He left his assigned position without authorization. The clan was not wrong about that fact. He leaned forward slightly. But a fact is not the whole truth, he said. He disobeyed an order because following it meant doing nothing while 261 people died. He made a choice. He chose them. And then he made sure his choice counted. Soren looked down at his hands on the table. His jaw was tight. His eyes were bright. His face was doing the controlled still thing, but it was working harder than usual. Harlan stood up slowly and said, "Come with me. There is something you need to see." The memorial wall was on the outer face of the main building, facing the plateau. It was a single panel of dark composite material, flush with the wall, not large but permanent. Names were carved into it. People the colony remembered. People whose choices had made it possible for this settlement to exist at all. Harlan led them to a section near the center of the panel. He stopped and pointed. There, carved cleanly and permanently into the dark surface, in 2 scripts side by side, human lettering on the left, the angular lines of dragon writing on the right, was a single name. Dravik. Soren stood in front of it and did not speak. The crew had come out of the building quietly behind them and stood a little distance back. Ren, Sela, Finn, Petra, Nora. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Soren looked at his father's name for a long time. Then he raised one small claw and touched the letters. Slowly. First the human script, tracing each character carefully. Then the dragon writing, following each angular line from beginning to end. He touched his father's name like he was learning it for the first time in a language he had not known he already spoke. When he lowered his claw he stood still for one more moment. Then he straightened up. Not loudly. Not with a speech or a dramatic gesture. He simply stopped being small. He stopped holding himself like something that needed to take up less space, like something that was waiting to be told it was allowed to exist. He stood up to his full height, small as that still was, in front of his father's name on a wall in a colony his father had died to save. And for the first time since the story began he looked exactly like who he was. The son of Commander Dravik. Standing in his father's sky. The return voyage began the morning after. The cargo had been unloaded. The colony had what it needed. Harlan had stood at the edge of the landing field and watched the Perseverance prepare for departure with his hands in his jacket pockets and his old fleet pin catching the light. When Soren walked up the boarding ramp he had turned and looked back at Harlan once. Harlan gave him a single nod. Steady and certain. The kind of nod that said something without needing words. Soren nodded back. Then he went inside. The ramp closed. The engines came up. The Perseverance lifted off the rocky plateau of Saratha's landing and climbed into the sky and then through the sky and then beyond it, out into the open dark where the stars were waiting. The return voyage was different. Not in any big obvious way. The ship was the same. The route was the same. The crew was the same. The engine room still smelled like warm metal and calibration fluid. The navigation console still showed the same transit charts. The forward window still looked out at the same endless dark. But Soren was not the same. He still worked beside Ren every day. He still maintained his section of the conduit panel with the same precise and careful attention. He still said thank you to Sela every single time she brought him food, formally and seriously, because some habits had come from something real and he did not see any reason to stop them just because things were better now. He still sat with Nora at the forward window in the evenings. But he asked questions now. Openly and continuously and without the careful rationing of someone who expected to be told to stop. He asked Ren about engine thrust ratios and secondary power systems and what happened to a ship's handling when the port thruster ran 2% below optimal. He asked Finn about jump calculations and how you accounted for gravitational drift on long routes. He asked Petra about communication frequencies and how you encoded a signal so it could not be easily intercepted. He asked Nora about everything else. What made a good captain? How you made decisions when you did not have enough information. How you kept a crew together on a long mission when people got tired and frustrated. How you knew when to follow a rule and when a rule was not the most important thing in the room. Nora answered every question. Completely and honestly, the way she had spoken to him from the very beginning. Wren complained once, to no one in particular, standing in the engine room doorway, that the hatchling asked more questions in a single day than most new crew members asked in their first month. Then he went back into the engine room and answered the next question. On the third day of the return voyage, Nora sat down at her private console after the evening meal and opened a document she had been thinking about since the memorial wall. Interspecies guardianship. It existed in the legal framework of the Galactic Humanitarian Office. It had existed for a long time. It was simply almost never used because almost every species had enough internal structure to absorb their own displaced young ones. The process required documentation, a formal review period, proof of stable living conditions, and the written consent of the minor involved. Nora worked through the application carefully. She pulled Sela's medical reports. She attached the humanitarian provision filing from the beginning of the voyage. She wrote a personal statement that was professional and precise and said exactly what needed to be said without unnecessary words. She asked Soren to come to her quarters before lights out. She explained what she was doing. She showed him the document. She told him what it meant and what it would change and what it would not change. She asked him if he understood. He read every word of the application himself, slowly and completely. Then he looked up at her and said yes. She filed it that night. The response from the Galactic Humanitarian Office came back faster than she expected. 3 days into the return journey. Faster response times usually meant one of two things. Either the application was very straightforward or something had complicated it. This one was complicated. A formal objection had been filed. Elder Cora and the Veteran clan had contacted the Humanitarian Office directly within hours of the application being submitted. The objection cited bloodline jurisdiction, cultural continuity provisions, the clan's right to determine the placement of dragon-born young ones regardless of circumstance. It was written in careful legal language by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Nora read it once. Then she forwarded it to Harlan at Saratha's landing with a short message that said only, "They have filed an objection. I thought you should know." She did not ask him to do anything. She did not tell him what she needed. She just told him what had happened. Harlan's reply came back within the hour. It was not short. It was a full recorded testimony. His voice was calm and steady throughout, the voice of an old man who had decided something a long time ago and was not interested in uncertainty. He described the battle in full detail. He described the flanking strike. He described the evacuation ships and the distances and the minutes and what it had looked like on the scanner when one fighter had broken from formation and gone alone into an impossible situation. He named every evacuation ship. He named the colony the young ones had come from. He gave the count, 261, and he explained exactly what that number meant and where every single one of those people had been going and what would have happened to them without those extra minutes. He described watching Dravik's fighter disappear from the scanner. He said clearly and directly what he believed that act was worth and what name it deserved and what it meant to call it a disgrace. He filed it with the Humanitarian Office. Then he sent copies to every interspecies veterans network he was still connected to. Old contacts from his fleet days. Other retired pilots. Ground crew. Support personnel. People who had served in mixed-species operations and understood what it meant to fly beside someone from a different world and trust them with your life. Nora did not find out about the copies until 2 days later. By then it had moved far beyond Harlan's personal contacts. Other veterans had seen it and sent their own accounts. Retired fleet personnel who remembered the battle and the official silence that had followed it. 2 people who had actually been on the evacuation ships. Adults now who had been children then, who remembered a terrifying day and a dragon fighter that had appeared between them and the enemy when nothing else could reach them in time. One of them wrote simply, "I did not know his name until today. I've thought about that pilot my entire life. Now I know. His name was Dravik. Please make sure his son knows that too." The message spread through veteran communities across 6 species. The Humanitarian Office Review Board received, on one side, the veteran clan's formal legal objection. On the other side they received a growing and very public record, testimony after testimony, account after account, of exactly who Commander Dravik had been and what his name actually stood for and why calling his bloodline disgrace said more about the people using that word than it did about him. Elder Cora withdrew the objection on a quiet morning 6 days into the return voyage. There was no announcement. No statement. The withdrawal was filed through the proper channel in plain formal language that said nothing beyond what was legally necessary. Nora received the notification while she was running a routine systems check. She read it. She set her console screen to standby. She went to find Soren. He was at the navigation console with Finn, standing on the small step Finn had built for him, working through the calculations for their final approach to Vera Station. He was concentrating. His head was slightly tilted the way it tilted when he was thinking hard about numbers. Soren, Nora said. He looked up. The guardianship application was approved, she said. The objection was withdrawn. It is done. Soren looked at her. He processed it in the careful, complete way he processed everything that mattered. He did not rush it. He took the full shape of it in. The clan withdrew? He asked. Yes, she said. Pause. So I stay, he said. Not quite a question. More like a fact being confirmed. You stay, she said. Soren held her gaze for one moment. Then he turned back to the navigation console. Good, he said quietly. I was almost finished with the docking approach calculation. Finn made a sound beside him that was not quite a cough and not quite a laugh. Nora stood in the doorway for a moment longer than she needed to. Then she walked back to the captain's chair. Behind her she heard Soren ask Finn a question about gravitational compensation on final approach. She heard Finn answer. She heard Soren absorb the answer and immediately ask a follow-up. She sat down and looked at the stars ahead and allowed herself, privately, a small and genuine smile. Vera Station appeared on the long-range scanner 2 hours later. As they came into the final docking lane, the crew settled into their arrival routine. Ren ran the pre-dock engine check. Petra opened the station communication channels. Finn confirmed the approach clearance. Sela updated the crew health logs. Everything moved with the easy, practiced rhythm of people who had done this many times and trusted each other completely. Soren was at the forward window. The same window. The same spot. The same view of the docking bay growing slowly larger as the Perseverance came in on its final approach. He was not pressed against the glass this time. He was not hunched or small or invisible. He stood straight with his hands loose at his sides and his crew jacket fitted properly on his shoulders. The one Sela had made for him, his size, his colors, with the small patch of the Perseverance on the left shoulder. In his jacket pocket, safe and familiar, was the cracked data chip. He watched the station grow larger. He watched the docking bay lights come on in sequence as the Perseverance moved into the lane. He watched the approach the same way he had always watched ships, with his full attention, with that complete and focused stillness that meant he was seeing everything. Nora stepped up beside him. She looked at the same view. The docking bay. The ships. The lanes of traffic moving in every direction through the busy station. The place where all of this had started, weeks ago, with a thin hatchling pressed against cold glass whispering to himself about a father he barely knew. She asked him quietly. What do you see? Soren was still for a moment. Looking out at the station. At the ships. At the open lanes stretching away in every direction toward everywhere the universe had to offer. Then he said, I see where I am going. The Perseverance docked with a low familiar sound. The landing clamps locked solid. The engines went quiet one by one. The running lights dimmed. Ren started the post-flight checklist in the engine room, grumbling to himself about something in the secondary systems that he was already planning to fix. Sela updated the last of the crew health files and wrote at the bottom in her careful, precise handwriting, Patient continues to do well. Finn filed the arrival report and left the navigation charts open on the secondary console the way he always did now. Petra closed the communication channels and immediately opened her messages because she had been waiting to check them for 3 hours. Soren reached into his jacket pocket and took out the data chip. He looked at it for a moment in his hand. The cracked edge. The broken casing. The small rough spot where the lock had failed long ago. He pressed the right spot. The image appeared. Small and faint and flickering, barely visible in the bright light of the bridge. His father in a flight suit. Standing in front of a ship. Looking at the camera with calm amber eyes. Soren looked at it for a long moment. Then he closed his hand around it gently, not hiding it away, just holding it, and he turned from the window and walked toward the boarding ramp with the rest of his crew. Not hiding. Not left behind. Not surviving on scraps in a corner of a docking bay where nobody noticed him. Walking with his crew in his jacket, with his father in his pocket and the stars at his back and somewhere ahead of him, waiting, a sky full of places he had not yet been and things he had not yet done and questions he had not yet asked and answers that were his to find. He did not have his father's wings yet. But he had something his father had always flown toward. And people worth flying with. And a sky worth flying toward. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.